suppose a bank has lent money to a steel company and the steel company owes 10,000 crores to the banking system. I mean, actually, we don't have to suppose there is an actual case. There are many actually, but without naming names or anything. Are we saying now, because of this empowerment which the government has made available to the RBI can direct lenders who've lent this money to the steel company to take the matter and invoke the IBC, the Insolvency and Banking sort of code, and take the company to the NCLT? Is this how it's going to work? That the RBI will attack the problem on it may choose to attack it case by case. It can ask banks, you take this one and invoke the IBC.
I mean, the point here is so it can. It's a commercial decision. As long as process is followed with the oversight committee, making sure that the process was kosher, this is a decision it may come to. It may come to a different decision. This is, as I mentioned, not something we will decide in Delhi. It will happen on a commercial basis in Mumbai, overseen by these RBI empowered oversight committees.
No, so
really up to the lenders to come together and do it.
Right. So we are essentially now talking about the RBI making the decision in place of the banks, right? I mean, RBI telling the banks, well, this is what you're going to do.
Not necessarily. And no, not at all. What will happen is that the oversight committee, the job of these oversight committees, empowered as they may be, will be essentially to oversee the commercial decisions being taken by these joint lender forums and other lenders, and make sure the three problems I noted right in the beginning do not clog up the decision-making process. So as I mentioned, compliance, the free rider problem, and the problem with fear of future investigation. The oversight committee's mandate will basically be to make sure that the whole thing was done in a proper process, and then finally provide a stamp of approval to the whole thing. Ultimately, in most cases at least, the group of lenders will come together to make some sensible commercial decision.
Sanjeev, the point about providing political cover with this oversight committee, there was one expectation that why not take out, banking officers out of the Prevention of Corruption Act. I mean, we've seen banking paralysis. Bankers, off the record, kind of running scared, not wanting to take decisions. I mean, you alluded to that, future action, future investigation, etc. Wouldn't that have been a more effective way of kind of giving bankers a free hand in resolving and making these hard decisions which required to be made?
The finance minister did allude in the press conference that this is a matter that will be separately being looked into. So there may be some changes there as well. But at the first instance, the powers are now being given to the Reserve Bank to take appropriate action as may be deemed necessary.
So, Sanjeev, let's break this down again and explain to us. For instance, a decision on whether a bank needs to take a haircut, whether that should be 20% or more, will that decision eventually have to be signed off on by the oversight committee, or will that be a decision that the bank's board will take and merely inform the oversight committee? How is this process going to work?
So some of the details will obviously be given to you very shortly by the Reserve Bank. But as I said, the most important principle on which this whole thing will be done will be based on commercial principles. So ultimately, yes, it will be something that the lenders will have to come together and decide on. Of course, their boards, etc., will be also involved in it. And then whatever the deal it is that they come up with, the oversight committee's job will be to make sure that process was followed and that whatever is finally agreed upon is complied to by everybody, and that ultimately that since they have the oversight committee has provided a certain stamp of approval that the process followed, consequently it can be hoped that future investigation is not anymore a concern for those taking decisions.
Sanjeev, you said that the action will now shift to Mumbai and it's going to be driven by the Reserve Bank, but the Finance Minister also alluded that there will perhaps be more steps that the central government will take. What can we expect in terms of future and further action on the part of the government beyond this amendment of the Banking Regulation Act to empower and give authority to the Reserve Bank explicitly?
Well, as I said, as a regulator, the Reserve Bank is the competent authority to do whatever is necessary. They have now been given all powers to do it. However, if the Finance Ministry feels, if the Reserve Bank feels that there are other things that the Finance Ministry and the government in general needs to do in order to help the cause, we will be very pleased to consider the matter and provide whatever support is necessary.
A quick question
it's really
before I toss
something
it
that
across
will be worked out as things go, and we will be flexible about the whole matter.
Are you still flexible on the idea of a bad bank or a public asset rehabilitation agency, which was the idea proposed by the chief economic advisor? Is that idea still on the table, or is it completely off the table?
Well, the bad bank idea is not being used. It was considered and were at some point, but it was thought that it would probably be faster to move into resolution mode more directly than to use a bad bank, which is ultimately a warehouse where ultimately you'll have to carry out some resolution again. So rather than warehouse it first in a bad bank and then do the resolution, we have gone for much more direct, targeted resolution because of, as I said, the specific issue, in this specific case, the problem is so concentrated, so it was possible to do it. Now, as a second order solution, it may be that the resolution mechanism comes up that there are some assets that should be warehoused for whatever reason. An asset reconstruction company of some sort, or one more private, public, whatever is the case, they could be used, but this is not the first order resolution mechanism. It could be the second order tool used to resolve things, but not a bad bank, but an asset reconstruction company may be considered if necessary. It is not, these are things that will happen, but it is not the first order tool that will be used.
So, Mr. Sanyal, we'll take it to mean that no bad bank is on the table, but a public or private asset management agency that you mentioned could be something that the government will consider in the future? Is that a certain?
Possibly, but as I said, it would be a second order part of the process. The first order part of the process, which the Reserve Bank will carry out, which is what has now been enabled through this ordinance.
You know, the other thing the Finance Minister stated very clearly is that the present status quo cannot continue to go on for too much longer, and that paralysis is detrimental to the economy. So therefore, while you have, said the action will now be from Mumbai, do you have a timeline, a discussion between the RBI and the government as to by when you want these bad loans to be resolved?
Well, it is not for us to decide that. The Reserve Bank will announce a timetable, I assume, but it will happen quickly.
There will be a timetable, there will be a deadline set for the resolution of these top 40 or 50 NPA accounts. Is that an accurate assessment?
See, it's like this. So this is a process. It's not like a one step and it's done kind of thing. So, but this issue has been hanging on our banking system for quite some time. So it will happen very quickly. I think the Reserve Bank will already have worked out the next steps and will announce it quite very soon. So you'll have to wait for that. But it will happen very quickly.
Could you give us a sense of by when we can hear these announcements from the Reserve Bank of India? Will it be by, as early as next week itself?
Yeah, possibly. I can't speak for them, but they would have already worked out quite a lot of it.